Welcome to The Planner's Perspective with Jessie Kara. This is the podcast for wedding planners and couples navigating South Asian weddings and everything that comes with them. Culture, family dynamics, money, design, expectations, and the real conversations no one prepares you for. I'm Jessie Kara, a South Asian wedding planner and educator trusted by couples and families when things get complicated. Here we go beyond timelines and Pinterest boards and talk about what actually happens behind the scenes. If you're a planner stepping into South Asian weddings or a couple who wants to understand the process more deeply, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Welcome to The Planner's Perspective. I'm Jessie Kara, wedding planner, designer, and educator with over 2 decades of experience planning multi-event South Asian celebrations around the world. If you're newly engaged in the early stages of planning or even just starting to have conversations about what your wedding might look like, this episode is especially for you. Today, we're not talking about venues, we're not talking about outfits, budgets, or guest counts. We're talking about the conversations you need to have before you plan a wedding. Because after more than 20 years in the industry, I can tell you this with certainty. Weddings don't create problems. They reveal what already exists. And by the end of this episode, you'll understand the patterns I see over and over again, and you'll have clarity on the conversations that protect your relationship long before the first deposit is paid. Before we talk about venues, guest counts, outfits, or budgets, I want to start somewhere else, because after more than 2 decades of planning weddings, I've learned something very clearly. Weddings don't create problems. They reveal what already exists. They reveal how people communicate under pressure. They reveal how couples protect each other or don't. They reveal how families handle boundaries, power, and expectations. There are moments during planning calls or on wedding days where I notice things and feel the urge to say something, but it's not my place. I don't know the full history of a relationship. I don't know what's been normalized. I don't know what happens behind closed doors. So instead, I observe. And when you observe long enough, patterns start to form. This episode is about the conversations couples need to have with each other before they even start planning a wedding. Because once planning begins, stress will amplify whatever hasn't already been discussed. This isn't about blame. It's not about shame. It's about awareness. Before you plan a wedding, you need to talk about being married, not the aesthetic, not the party, not the photos. The marriage. You need to ask each other how conflict will be handled when it shows up. Not if, but when. Because it will. What happens when one of you feels hurt or dismissed? Do you talk it through, shut down, avoid it, or joke it away? And when things go wrong, because they will, what does repair actually look like? Planning a wedding is often the first time couples experience pressure from every direction at once. Family opinions, cultural expectations, financial realities, emotional stress. Everyone wants something, and suddenly you're managing far more than just your relationship. If these conversations haven't happened, the wedding will force them. One of the first things I notice as a planner is how partners speak about each other, especially in front of family. I've been on planning calls where a groom makes small comments about the bride's personality or appearance. They're framed as jokes. Everyone laughs, and then I awkwardly try to move the conversation on. But what's happening underneath is quieter and more powerful. When you speak about your partner that way publicly, you're setting the tone for how others treat them. You're opening the door. I've seen how that door widens over time. I remember a welcome party late in the evening. Drinks had been flowing, the music had just been turned off. The bride and her friends were singing and dancing as they walked back, just enjoying the beginning of her wedding week. The groom loudly called out her behavior, told her she was being too loud. And you could feel it instantly. Her energy shifted. Her body language changed. The joy dimmed. What I later learned was that this wasn't the first time. The very part of her personality that had attracted him, her joy, her expressiveness, her presence, was now the part he wanted her to quiet so she could fit more neatly into his world. And in that moment, he wasn't just speaking to her. He was confirming to his family that the comments and snide remarks they'd already been making were acceptable. As a couple, it is your responsibility to ensure your families treat your partner with respect. And that begins with how you talk about them, whether they're in the room or not. Is it really a joke if they aren't laughing? Would you say it if they were standing right there? And if you wouldn't, why does it feel okay when they're not? This also shows up in smaller, more subtle expectations couples place on each other, especially around what they hope their wedding day will look like emotionally. I see a lot of content online about couples sticking together on their wedding day, holding hands, walking into rooms together, always being side by side. And then I see brides try to implement this at their reception, sometimes without success, and feel genuinely disappointed or frustrated that their partner didn't give them what they wanted. But here's the truth. If you're not already walking into rooms together, if you are not already checking in with each other at gatherings, if you're not already moving as a unit socially, it's not suddenly going to happen at your reception. Weddings don't magically change behavior. They magnify what's already there. If staying connected throughout the night is truly important to you, that's a conversation you need to have before the wedding. And more importantly, it's something you need to practice in real life. Start small. Start at dinners with friends, at family gatherings, at events where you naturally drift apart. Because when something becomes a natural part of your relationship, it doesn't feel forced on a wedding day. It feels familiar. And this idea of expectations versus reality shows up again when conflict enters the picture. Conflict itself isn't the problem, avoiding it is. I remember planning with a couple where everything shifted once we moved into conversation involving the groom's parents. Up until that point, the bride had been thoughtful and respectful about budgets and expectations, but when his parents entered the conversation, her tone changed. There was an unspoken assumption that certain things would be overlooked or prioritized simply because it wasn't her side contributing. The groom started to shut down, which I see far too often. But instead of disappearing, he spoke up. He calmly asked why her parents' expectations were being respected while his weren't. There was no accusation, no escalation, just clarity. They didn't immediately agree. It wasn't perfect, but they stayed in the conversation. They compromised. That moment stayed with me because it showed me something important. When life gets hard, and it will, they have the tools to walk through it together. I've also seen couples handle conflict by choosing clarity over pressure. I was in an early planning meeting once that was incredibly charged. Expectations were misaligned, emotions were high, everyone wanted something different. 2 days later, the couple reached out. They wanted to postpone their wedding and reduce their budget. Instead of forcing themselves through months of stress to meet expectations in exchange for financial contribution, they chose a smaller, more intimate celebration, one that actually reflected who they were. That wasn't failure, that was alignment. Money plays a huge role in all of this, and money is never just money. It brings up insecurity, it shifts power, it changes whose voice carries weight. In South Asian weddings, especially where parents often contribute financially, expectations can exist beneath the surface, invisible unless you understand the cultural context. I've seen situations where the more affluent family begins setting expectations for everyone else. They take over planning, they decide what matters, and slowly the other family, and sometimes even the partner, starts to feel less than. I've been told this is what we expect, let them know and get it done. And if I'm honest, the part of my job I struggle with the most is being the messenger, carrying pressure that doesn't belong to me. Because for couples, money conversations aren't just logistical, they're emotional. If money dictates respect during wedding planning, those patterns don't disappear after the wedding. Money should support a celebration, not silence people within it. Before you open Pinterest, before you tour venues, before you start guest lists, sit down together and answer these questions honestly. How will we handle conflict? If one of us feels disrespected in public, what happens next? What do we want out of this marriage, not just the wedding? What is non-negotiable? Whose opinions matter now and whose will matter once we're married? And I want to say this clearly to women and men. Just because someone blows your mind in bed and makes you feel everything does not mean this is the person you want to wake up next to for the rest of your life. Chemistry is powerful, but it doesn't build safety. It doesn't navigate conflict, and it doesn't protect you in rooms that test your relationship. A partner who loves and respects you behind closed doors and stands by you publicly will take you much farther than one who just makes your eyes roll back. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this episode, it's this. Pay attention to who feels safe to speak and who feels like they need to stay quiet. Those patterns don't start after the wedding. They start during planning. The goal isn't a perfect wedding. It's a partnership where both people are protected, especially in rooms that test them. If this episode resonated with you and you're planning your own South Asian weddings, I want you on the waitlist for Perfectly Planned. Perfectly Planned is my step-by-step framework for couples who want clarity, structure, and cultural awareness woven into their planning process without losing themselves in it. When you join the waitlist, you'll be the first to know when doors open and you'll receive early access bonuses that won't be available publicly. You can join at the link in the show notes. And if this conversation sparks something important between you and your partner, share this episode with them and listen to it together. I'll see you in the next episode of The Planner's Perspective. If today's episode helped things click or gave you a new perspective, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next. This podcast exists to support planners in doing their best work and to help couples feel informed, confident, and prepared as they navigate their very own South Asian wedding. If there's something specific you want me to talk about, an episode idea you'd love to hear, a planning story you want to share, or a question you're sitting with, there's a link in the show notes where you can send it all in. I promise I will read every submission, and many of them will shape future episodes. You can connect with me at www.jessiekara.com or on Instagram at jessiekara. If you're ready to navigate South Asian weddings with intention and confidence, I'll see you there. And if this podcast is supporting you in any way, I would truly appreciate you taking a moment to leave a 5-star review. It helps more planners and couples find these conversations and keep the space growing. Until next time, trust your perspective and plan with clarity.